What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I am Jack Allen. If you're not following me, at COJAC Podcast, but I am very excited for tonight's guest. Being in this world or whatever, you recognize people who actually put in so much time and effort and research, as opposed to people that just say these crazy things that sound great, but just also make us look foolish. Johnny is obviously not one of those guys. He is one that puts in so much time and effort into research and studying these connections. So I'm excited to have him on. Johnny, welcome. How you doing today, buddy?
Yo, Jack, man, I'm really happy to be on. I'm really, really happy to be here. And thanks for the kind words. Like I do spend a lot of time with my nose on the grindstone, trying to get ahead of everything and trying to get trying to work out what's going on,
Yeah.
like everybody else.
Well, and so how long you been? Because how long you been doing this? Like this researching and all exposing all this.
Yeah, I mean, I started research, and I think for all researchers, it's hard to know when because you automatically kind of become a researcher or you're not. You want to know more, so you go and read one article, you go read another article, you go read another article, and then at some point you leave the articles and you go somewhere else and you go look at a little bit more information and a little bit more, and then suddenly you find like databases and archives which then you could trawl through, and then you find like you're looking for things. It doesn't start off with you looking for conspiracies or stuff. You're looking for other things, and then you get to learn how to use all the technology, and boom. And it was for me, it was about 2015. I was having like a bit of a spiral in my life. I was a musician. I had spent a lot of years being ill. I was uh, on drugs. I was hooked up. I had got up to morphine. Like I had people who were feeding me really heavy drugs, and I was going out. I was like, I was out of here.
Yeah.
2015. I was like checked out. I am going to kill myself. Like, this is it. And then I reached a point where it was like, okay, well, I really do actually want to do that. Really do want to get out of this because I
Yeah.
hate it all. And so I went up to the hillsides in Wales and I picked a load of Welsh magic mushrooms, loads of Welsh magic mushrooms. And I spent 3 months basically saying, okay, I'll spend 3 months tripping because I mean, if I'm gonna die anyway, then all the warnings don't
Yeah.
make no difference anyway. And I'll like investigate my mind inside, outside, darkness, sit there meditating, learn about myself, and I was trying. And I got to the point where I realized, well, if I'm gonna die, then I may as well go out shooting and kicking and really I knew what was deep down, what was the problem inside me. I had so much I wanted to say, and what you said at the beginning is really important. you know Loads of people, and I wanted to be that person who was saying stuff and it
Mhm.
meant something to somebody, but anything I said at that point would be vacuous. I could talk about something I knew, but it would just be, I wouldn't care about it because all of the things I knew I didn't really care about. I didn't have a
Mhm.
passion for them. I felt like a great, like lots of people, like an emptiness. And I knew where I needed to go. I knew where the direction was. And I got on a wave. I've talked about this a lot with people. I got on a karmic wave. I said, I had loads of troubles. I mean, the reason why I got to that space in my head was, I had been groomed by a pedophile when I was young.
Damn.
My whole like childhood had been a mixture of physical abuse, psychological abuse, um, and I had kind of been ill from when I was 13 with something called Graves' disease. It was undiagnosed till I was 27, and I was almost dying. I had all of these troubles and I had all these issues. But at the end of the day, I knew that the real thing I was running away from was the truth of everything. Realizing, I had got to a point, I realized something, I defined something really obvious about myself during this time, that if I didn't know something, I was scared to look. And I think loads of us feel like that. And we
Mhm.
give into that. It's like giving in to greed, or it's like not examining your own ego because it's so fucking scary. It's so scary to
Yeah.
look at yourself properly. And you know that if you examine others, the moment you examine others, you project that examination back onto yourself. And then you start studying yourself, and then you feel really bad because you're too busy. You're judging other people, and then you realize at some point, oh God, I'm judging that person, but I'm doing the same thing. And then you what you learn is that by studying others, you become better yourself, but you don't want to become better at the start because you fear change. You fear that
Mm.
you'll lose yourself. You fear that you'll become someone else, that you'll go on a journey and you won't be able to turn back from it, and you'll get on the wave. And once you're on the wave, there ain't no getting off the wave. The wave pushes you along. And I've been since 2015, 16, I hopped on the wave. I didn't get off, and it's been mad. My life has been crazy. It's got crazier and crazier, and I have moments of synchronicity every week where everything just like I'm able to go and talk to someone. Suddenly something happens that means I can help them, or I can do something that benefits somebody else. And that is my life now. I kind of just keep stepping forward to the next thing and stepping forward. I have these conversations. I feel like I'm not a religious man, but
Mm.
I do believe that there's a similarity between my idea of what the universe is, what karma is, what the wave I'm on is, what truth is, and everything that religious people, teach and learn. It is so much similarity. They're basically these same things,
Mm.
just there's no infrastructure to what I believe. It's just the feeling, the understanding, truth, love, goodness, and knowledge. Just taking all of the knowledge and see what that says about yourself then. And after a while, you learn yourself so well that you no longer have to look at yourself, and then you can see the information. And
Love it.
I just want to say one more little
Oh,
thing.
go for it, dude.
It's,
Yeah.
man, there was something that happened with researching for all budding researchers or whatever, or writers. I learned this process where I go in and I dragnet information. So I take all of the information I can find about any one subject, I put in chronological order, and I put it down on paper. I basically link it up so people can understand it. But
Yeah.
basically, I'm just giving them a straight fact. But for me at first, trying to go through that process, I had so much ego, so much emotional experience that affected how I viewed the subjects that I was researching, and they're always bad people, so you
Always.
always feel like you want to judge them anyway. But I knew that I had to like get out of that frame of mind, and slowly, what I've discovered is that now what I do is I spend a day or 2 days hate rage researching whatever I'm doing, and then it all goes. So at some point, chi enters, like this. It becomes everything is viewed stoically from an exterior view. I'm just suddenly I'm no longer like emotionally attached to all these things,
Right.
and I can go right now. I can really examine a subject. And that was only after all of those things, all of that journey, all of those sort of like the culmination of all this experience and letting go of certain parts of my own sort of like, and like I say, I keep saying the word ego, and it really is. It's like, you examine information for your own perspective, or you have to lose your own perspective at some point, and your perspective is viewed through this prism of your own independent identity, which is so obviously attached to the ego and the idea of the ego. So now I that's where I got to now. Now I study information, I look at information, and I'm able to put it in chronological order and whap it out there. And people go, wow, you're doing something that no one does anymore. And yet it seems so simple, but there was a whole like a litany of tragedy that
Right.
had to happen for me to understand how simple everything is.
Hi, dude, I love it. That was a beautiful sentiment. So since you start, because I was a heroin addict, so I was like you for a long time. But since you kind of start been really heavily researched in 2015, is it just our perspective that things have just gotten like infinitely crazier these last 3 years, or has it actually like have you also noticed this just uptick of insanity?
Yeah, I think it's an exponential growth in insanity. It just keeps going up. It really kicked off. I would personally say that it started around 2008 to 2010. You could sense something was different, like the leash had been taken off politically. And then the next like 3, 4, 5 years, you saw this introduction of these new characters on the scene that were almost like a formed Hegelian dialectic being formed, manifesting, creating the Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, the Viktor Orban in Hungary, the Donald Trump in America, the creation of the counter narrative. So the establishment that was losing had the enemies so that they could be the heroes again, and they could say, look at these enemies, let's fight these enemies. And then so all of these things had a cycle. So you had like a 4-year cycle where they changed, like I say, 2010 to 2014, where they started to change that sort of narrative, started to say, okay, we got to paint ourselves as a hero somehow because we're so not. So we need a load of enemies. The creation of the enemies, then the slander of the enemies. I mean, that's for people in Britain as well. I mean, you had in America, you had Trump and etc. In Britain, we had that so heavily with Corbyn. It was 2016, 17, 18. He was just saying the nastiest things about him and then we had these Brexit things. But all of these things were like everything was getting crazier and crazier, and it was like exponential growth of craziness constantly going up. And when it hit, and I think everybody kept saying, agenda 2021 or 2030 and all of this, and we're getting there. We're getting there now. And people didn't really realize what that meant, and it really did. It does seem that from 2021 there really had been a complete rollout of a new ideology, a transhumanist ideology, a way to change things for the future. The agenda that they wanted to enact has started in 2021, just as I said it was, and they aim to get most of it done and sealed off by 2030. And I think we're only going to see this like increase and increase and increase. So the next like 7 years are going to be nuts. It's going to be nuts. I don't think we'll even recognize the human race to an extent afterwards, because they will have messed around with it and forced us apart so much. So yeah, that's what I see, but that's my own personal view from all of this. Go on.
I like struggle with this all the time, the war in like Ukraine, because I flip-flop back and forth between all these people are all owned by the same bankers or whatever. Like, is this just all kayfabe, WWE? What's your take on, is this Ukraine war? Are we actually antagonists with Russia? I always bring up, I don't know if you ever read Anthony Sutton's book or his Wall Street trilogy, but he brings up how the Soviet Union and the Bolshevik Revolution all couldn't have happened without American and German capitalists, bankers. So, who's really an enemy? So what do you think is Ukraine, Russia? Is this a real battle, or people, what do you think's going on there?
Yeah, I think this is still what you've got to realize is that the style of warfare is probably different from the prevailing agenda of the time, and they come from two different times and two different agendas. So the style of warfare is the overarching fear of mutually assured destruction, with underneath perpetual limited warfare that is planned to go on forever. And you see it. I mean, it's very describable with Ukraine, because you have like a Russian unit retreats, and then the Ukrainian move into the area, and then the Russians move into an area, and the Ukrainians quickly retreat, and then it's backwards and forwards. Now this this was kind of agreed on by American and Russia through a load. After Kissinger wrote Nuclear War and Foreign Policy in 1957, by 1958 they were publicly talking about the ideas that he brought up in there, and the idea of saying to the Americans, listen, we don't want to use these big nuclear weapons like you're developing. I mean, eventually, within a few years from then, Russia would develop the biggest nuke to ever go off. We don't want to do that because that's no good for we all die. So we don't want to play that game. What we got to do is agree to have basically a smaller, limited nuclear warfare. We don't want to use the big sticks. We'll use smaller nukes against each other. And if we can agree on that, then we can get on with it. You know, John Foster Dulles was saying this out loud in 1958. It's like in newspapers. I covered this like in newspapers. They're saying, you know, we can't fight you, but in that newspaper article I'm referring to, they were saying, but the Russians won't listen to us. The Russians still want to play with their big sticks, but the Russians were as scared as the Americans were. So what the Russians did was eventually get on board. What happened through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the noughties to now? We see the same thing happen. Perpetual limited warfare, constantly going. Vietnam warfare.
Yeah, that's what I was
Kissinger's war. Yeah, and then it's already been developed and practiced before, but then you're talking like oh god, every single conflict, Afghanistan, first Iraq, second Afghanistan, all of it is perpetual limited warfare. It's Kissinger war, so it's not meant to win. It's not meant to be. It's meant to cause instability in the minds of us, the peaceful folk, so we will accept whatever they say, and we will see them as a savior on whichever side we are. And they're playing the same game. So the Russians are, I mean, the words they will use to their own populations are the same words the Americans will use to their populations, and the British will use to their populations. And it's a safe, agreed upon strategy. And if you look at the I was on Russian federal TV documentary the other day, talking about Kissinger. They wanted to talk to me about Kissinger's international seminar at Harvard and how Klaus Schwab came to power, because of course that fits their narrative. But I was talking about the Kissinger's International Seminar, which was run in the 50s and 60s out of Harvard, and was a training program to bring up young global leaders, and was really what Klaus Schwab went through. And Klaus Schwab would later create the Global Leaders for Tomorrow and the Young Global Leaders program, and so he would do the same thing. But what they don't know, what the Russian TV don't realize, while they were, you know, saying, "Oh yeah, look how bad all of these people are." Well, there was two programs that was started in 1992, 1993. There was Global Leaders for Tomorrow, which would be young global leaders. And there was something that was, I think it was called the Young Patriot program, which was the Russian version, run by the same people to choose the future leader of Russia. And there was only three candidates to the Russian Patriot. One of them was Vladimir Putin. And that was 1992, 1993. Yeah. And by 1999, Yeltsin's turning around and saying, that's your new leader. Bye. You know, that's it. That's how it is. It's already the same people choosing the same things, agreeing on the same battle, fighting on the same battlegrounds, under the same agenda. But the agenda's from something in the 50s, but the actual style of warfare, the style of warfare is from something like that. But the actual agenda that's on the ground is also kind of like that, but it's a morphed version. And both sides, like the Russians and the West, they have the same things going on behind the scenes. They're creating CBDCs, they're injecting their people with whatever, and they're doing all of the same things that everybody else is doing, because they're going the same direction. And when they're not at war, well, they've got Cyber Polygon going at the World Economic Forum, where Tony Blair, American intelligence officials, and Mikhail Mishustin, the prime minister or president of Russia, I can't remember which way it is now at the moment. One of them's, you know, Putin's one, and he swaps around all the time. Are the people and one of the head of Sberbank, the Russian bank, are all part of the cyber polygon program together. It's a really thin line between this war and it's all a narrative. And so, is it really happening? There are people dying. These people
Right.
don't care. They don't care about people dying, and it helps to prop up the idea to the majority of people that they could one day be in that situation of dying. It's not necessarily whether who's dying. It doesn't really matter. As long as they're reporting death, then people have fear of death, and the process continues.
Dude, that was the best explanation I've ever heard. That was awesome. That's exactly what it is. It says limited
Mhm.
forever war, dude. That was beautiful. My
Yeah.
God, that's
Thank you.
exactly
Thank
it.
you, Jack. Cheers to
Damn,
you.
dude. That because it's just so hard to decipher what's real and what's not. But that's literally I'm just my mind, I'm like processing this. Like that's what every war is, we dropped 40, we left $40 billion in a country that we spent billions fighting for nothing because it was again this limited warfare that you just mentioned.
I
It's just
look at what's happening over the past week, yeah? Um, and it works for me as well. It works for me. I don't claim to be immune to it yet, but I hear about this Wagner stuff, this Russian. I can't remember what the guy's name is. I can never remember the names. He's a passing guy anyway. He'll be dead in a week. I hear about this, and it comes on, and the first feeling I have is like this tingle over me, all over me, like, oh my God, I'm watching history. I'm watching history happen. And then I have this like ring in my head that comes in now and says, stop it, John. It's a bloody mainstream news. What are you doing? To stop believing what they're saying and think about it. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, this is probably a load of balls, isn't it? So I'm watching it and I'm thinking, okay, what are they telling me? They're telling me that this guy is marching on Moscow with military units. He's going to take down Moscow. He's going to take it over, and this, that, the other. And I got a friend saying that to me on the side, and another friend over there saying, "Oh yeah, this looks real." And I'm like, "No, it's not going to be real. It's going to turn out that none of this, what they've said on the mainstream media, is correct." And even though I feel that it's right as well and it's real and I feel the tingles as well,
right.
you the only difference between like accepting that and going for it is just like it's not using your rational mind. That's
Right.
the only thing. You have to stop using your rational mind, because your rational mind is every single time they lie to you. And now I look at the news and what they're saying. They're saying, oh no, he was saying he was demonstrating and he had no intention to take Moscow, and he was marching to Rostov to speak with two guys who refused to speak with him, and he'll probably be dead within a week. Now that's like completely different than the feeling you
Yeah.
get at the beginning, and it's
Right.
5 days. Nowadays they can't keep one of these narratives going for a week.
No.
It's when we're talking about how quickly things are moving and how fast and more rapidly it's developing. That's an example of it. Something
Yeah.
like that used to be like months and months and
That's
months of
such a
people
good point.
talking backwards, forwards. Now
Yeah.
it's just like 5 days and it's exposed. Now on to the next psyop, on to the next psyop. This is fifth generation warfare. This is what they do. This is what we can expect. Soon we won't even know. Soon, yeah, they'll type in AI, they'll type in Russia scare the bloody people, and the AI will go and make a load of reports, and you'll have some reporter tell you something that seems exactly true, and everybody's heart rate will go up. That's
Dude,
it.
you're in that again, like, and it's a good micro macro of society. Like how you said, these psyops used to be able to be dragged out for months. I mean, people can't pay attention for longer than 30 seconds. So they need to keep these fresh news stories that captivate and interest because the public can't even read a book. Probably 90% hasn't read one in 20 years, So
Yeah,
that's a
yeah, I
good point.
know, no, man. It's amazing. It's amazing to see how switched off people are. And I talk to oh my God, I can't talk to people. I try and talk to people about like normal people in the park about what's going on. People I know really well. I try and say, this is going on, this is going on, and they're still defending Marx or some stuff like that. I'm having arguments where it's like base arguments about Marx, and it's like we're well beyond Marx now, people. We're well beyond that. We're well beyond talking about like theory from the 1800s, which will be completely irrelevant in the next 10 years because of how technology is moving. We're well beyond having conversations about which way we should go. We need to have already chosen our direction, because our enemies, the people who are against us, have all chosen their directions. They've all sealed this up. I mean, when I was talking about the Young Global Leaders program earlier, that was them. The fall of the Berlin Wall, they instantly set up this program. First years, Tony Blair,
No way.
Viktor Orban, Nicolas Sarkozy, Angela Merkel, Gordon Brown, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, all of the boys. First year, they started it up because they knew we're about to take over everything. And by 1997, they'd already been installing all of their people into power, and they'd already won. And I've said to loads of people, we're so far behind the party. Like, we're 25 years late to the party. It's 25 years. We're only just working out now that the whole thing was sealed up and organized then, and it's now been going for so long it's become industrial. And how do you stop something that's industrial apart from ending up at war?
That's absolutely, dude. Damn, man. So that's kind of like what I want it to be like an actual. I almost like would prefer it to be actual animosity between China and America, or because there it leaves room for like a good guy versus a bad guy, I guess, or a better alternative. But it's almost more depressing to know that they're all on the same page, because it's just as screwed everywhere. It's like
the Chinese are particularly. I mean, it's particularly interesting for us in the West, because do you know? Have you ever gone onto a Chinese website?
No.
Have you ever gone into the Chinese interweb, whatever it is? I don't know what it is. I did a bit of research into Wuhan right at the start. And looked at their pages. It's hilarious, actually, because it's like October 2019. There's suddenly the websites just stop saying stuff almost completely,
Really?
and that is really the time when it got released. Like that, they crap themselves. It goes clear, and then they start, like a few weeks later, they start producing things again on there. Other than that, it just goes dead for that period, and you can tell what happened. But there's not much on these sites, there's not much, and we can't understand it anyway because it's all in bloody Chinese. So we don't even know what's going on in there. And Chinese culture is so different from Western culture that even if you talk to a Chinese person in the street, it would take you probably a year of knowing each other before you could get past the cultural boundaries to be able to have a proper conversation about what's really going on in China and what the people in China feel like and how they act. And I just don't think we have a realization of what's really going on there. What's going on there is just they're about 5 years ahead of the plan that's going on over here, and it's the same plan and same things happening. They're creating mega cities at high speed, and I think what China gets to do it with authoritarian rule. So they don't have to worry about going through all the procedures. So they're racing along on it. And that was something I think that Kissinger, the World Economic Forum, and others worked out in the late 70s, early 80s, maybe even before that. They'd already mapped out and gamed out which countries were going to do the best in the future, and they knew that China wasn't just going to be a manufacturing base forever. Eventually it would step up to the next level, and then it would be the ruling power. And I think a lot of what the New World Order, Kissinger ideology was aimed at was trying to co-opt and align with China for when that time comes, so that China doesn't feel threatened when that time comes, and America is still can remain on top somehow. However, that isn't how it's playing out in reality, because China's always going to get a little bit threatened, and this is the problem. They're all on the same agenda, but they all want their version of the agenda to go.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, can you imagine once there's Chinese CBDCs, Russian CBDC, a European CBDC, and an American CBDC, who's going to then say, okay, which one of you then gives up all your CBDCs and joins our CBDC to
Right.
make the one global government CBDC, and then they'll all be like, I don't think I want to do that right now. It gets up to a point where and it's been foreseen within fiction and within other things that you'll end up with 3 major super states more likely than the global government because people argue, and those super states will probably be somehow aligned with race. So there would be possibly like an entire Americans and the European and then a Chinese. And we can kind of see that playing out now anyway. And like I say, they're heading towards the same things technologically, the same. And when you go and look at things that Epstein and Clinton were doing with China, it's crazy. They were just selling off everything. You want nuclear codes?
Elaborate on that?
Anything. There is. Oh God, I can't remember where it is from, but I was researching for One Nation Under Blackmail, Volume 2, for Whitney Webb.
Yeah.
And we were looking at loads of. I mean, I was looking at the trips with Clinton and Epstein, and we had loads of conversations about the evidence and what the evidence pointed at, and the evidence points really what they were doing in intelligence level, especially in Asia, was selling off nuclear technology to the Chinese in a way that is completely and utterly illegal, so far beyond illegal. But it doesn't matter, because by the time that the Chinese will benefit from that, they'll also be selling nuclear technology of some type to America and backwards and forwards, because they're all on the same side. But they've got to do this behind the scenes to create the air of this we're against you and you're against us, we're rivals and all of this. Really, these people, the people like Clinton after he left the White House, and Epstein and others, are going around and doing the stuff behind the scenes that they won't talk about, that they're doing out loud, but we all know is going on. So why is Hunter Biden hanging around in places like China and Ukraine all of the time? Why is all of if you look at Klaus Schwab, where's Klaus Schwab's son, Olivier Schwab? Where's he hanging out? China, all of the time. China. Yeah, Junkerman, who was an Epstein associate, and because I've mentioned her name now, this will be pulled off YouTube. I'm very sorry about that.
I pull them all off. It's all right. Don't worry about it.
well, she pulls off all the rich men. Anyway, so Junkerman, she's the same. She went. It's like they all go through this Chinese route at some point. They all go through Chinese because they can make loads of money in China, and all the Chinese want to be on board because they know they're co-opting each other, they're selling each other's technology to each other. And it doesn't matter, because technology is moving so fast. Growth of technology is going zoom, that by 20 years' time, nuclear technology will be easy to counteract with whatever terrible, horrible technology in the future is fought up. And it was people like Herman Kahn, who was one of the mentors of Klaus Schwab and called the real Dr. Strangelove, who mapped all of this out in the year 2000 and the next 200 years. 2 documents which basically at the Hudson Institute, they gamed out in 1966, 1967, they gamed out all of the potential future technologies that were likely in the foreseeable future, anything you could possibly get to, and the likelihood of us actually achieving that. What you discover is that technology rises so quickly that in 1945, the whole world changed because of the atomic bomb. And that was a shift where one technology changed an entire, they created an epoch, and the start of a new epochal era.
Right.
And later on, we got 5 in the next 10 years. We got 5 of those powerful technologies about to come up. You know, in the next 100 years, we've got loads of them.
That's a great, yeah.
AGI is right at the end of there. You know, artificial general intelligence is right at the end, because after that we're doomed. But in between there, like, they got stuff they're going to put in your brain that'll make all our brains the same. They got things that you'll stick in your arm, you stick in your bum. It doesn't make no difference. They'll stick them everywhere. We'll be flying around, we'll be scooting around, we'll be implanting stuff inside us. We'll be something different before you know it. Hey, before you know it, you'll be uploading your mind to the hive mind, and you'll be hanging out with Bill Gates inside Bill Gates' brain. How about that? And you'll be chuckling together. Well, you won't need to chuckle, because you won't feel anymore, and you won't need to feel, because you're part of the collective. You're part of the ether. And that's that. You know, this is what these people are describing as well. When you look at the transhumanists like Barbara Marx Hubbard, you get into a point where they start to say, where are we going? Oh, we do all of this technology, and then it'll move really quick. We'll get to AGI, and then we'll all upload our brains to the system and live in complete harmony, where we're orgasming to the sound of children all of the time. You know, it's insane where they're going.
You already kind of see that. You know, you already, like, on Twitter, you see this hive. I mean, it's just one side or the other, but they all have the same exact, you know, like how you just talked about Poygin or whatever, that Russian guy. I remember all these GIFs of the Ukraine flags, like the popcorn eating GIFs and cheering. You know, it's just now it's not perfect harmony. It's just one side or the other.
Yeah, everything's. I think the fact of memes is everything is like mimetic now. Everything is just bouncing off. It's really quick. It's causing, like, us, like, we see something, we know what it is, we go and then the next thing's happening, we go and then we're dead. You know, it's like we are constantly distracted. Everything is really describable in no time. We're waking up at a speed that is as fast as the technology is improving, as fast as the authoritarian rule is being put on us, is as fast as the agenda is going. You know, we are waking up as fast. Everything is related. Everything is linked, whether we like it or not. We will. It is true, and we will see. When I said earlier, you know, I've had loads of, like, examples of synchronicity in my life recently, where things have been like, oh man, I'm obviously here to do this thing right now, or to say this thing right now. And a lot of it is just little things, just helping people in my area. I'm meeting people, and like suddenly I'm having a conversation, I realize I'm the person to say this sort of thing to them now, and then it makes them be able to go on or get something. But I feel that that's going to keep happening as well. I feel that there's, like, as things go into crisis, more people say, I see crisis. I know what crisis looks like. I've experienced crisis, and we can go through this together. So there's real negatives happening, but there's real positives, because the normal everyday the reaction, the automatic reaction to crisis is for solution, and for people to try and find ways through the crisis. So it's not all doom and gloom. There is like good stuff in there.
I know, yeah, you can't be a total black pill. You know, it's too depressing to live life like that.
Yeah, but I mean, it looks pretty bad, doesn't it? I mean,
it does. Outlook does look bleak. Yeah.
They're talking about bees that can give you diseases. I mean, things are pretty bad. I don't know. I think this is something else. That Herman Kahn, who I mentioned earlier, this is something else. This is something he said, is that, you know, we have so many different challenges coming towards us in the next 50, 60 years, that some of them are extinction level events if we do not manage them and we do not handle them properly. And yet we're walking towards it. We're running towards it. We're screaming towards it. We're sending people like Epstein and Hunter Biden into it to manage it and to exchange it. And we're not talking about it properly, just in case the other side finds out and we hide it away and give it to the most nefarious people. You know, this is the direction we're headed. We are humans. We keep doing the same thing. A lot of it is killing ourselves.
Dude, that was beautiful as well. That's do you think I know I'm just like asking random questions now, but you're so so I always like run into these questions, so kind of changing the topic a little bit, but I always am wondering, why is intelligence, spycraft so linked with the occult and banking? Why are these three things in your like? Why are they all like John D for a magician spy and Crowley and all these people and Parsons? So many of these people are spies and but also like or magicians. What's like linking these two things together?
Okay, I think one of the things is literature. So one of the things that people who are in comprehensives like me, I went to, I don't know, we call it public schools over here, but I think it's public schools. Well, we just state schools,
Okay.
people who aren't educated so much. Well, we've had our the curriculum. Things on the curriculum removed. All of the stuff that can help us progress in certain ways has been removed, but some of that comes with elements of other things. So when I say this, you go back to philosophy, ancient philosophy, Marcus Aurelius, Socrates, stuff like that. That was all taken out of the curriculum in the UK for good reason, because it leads people to have logical thought and be able to rationalize things and be able to note fallacies, etc. But also, in studying it, you're allowed to think esoterically. Now, you're also allowed to look at things, ancient stories that give you really like it deeply. If you look at them deeply and you look at the real themes involved in them, then you're able to say, I understand humanity, I understand the world around me, and I can act in certain ways. But it also leads you to end up looking at things maybe not religiously. Maybe that didn't suit the religious orders of the time. That's why that sort of ancient sort of philosophy was taken out, like the Greek and stuff was taken out because it didn't sit well with biblical scholars or whatnot. But eventually, there was a magic attached to that as well. There was a magic attached to the ancient stuff. When you read the Greek tragedies and stuff like that, there was a magic always within there and an essence of it. And I think it was a pagan thing that was lost as well. There's like an element of pagan ritual that can be lost, but that's kind of not all. That obsession becomes something that the rich know that they have knowledge of, that they know separates them from the poor, and they know Latin, they know these things in the original language, they know this or that, they know more, and because of that, then that gives them identity and allows them to create certain organizations like, well, the Freemasons or Bohemian Grove, or as I mentioned in a podcast the other day, the Kit Kat Club in the UK, not very well known.
Never heard of that.
No, it was for philosophers and scholars, etc. It was recreated by Ghislaine Maxwell in the 90s or the noughties, because these people, all educated at the same level, are all in the same sort of like cliques, and with it comes a lot of magic. So Bohemian Grove, a lot about Bohemian Grove was about them having a play. They had certain plays that were repeated, but then they had people come in and do really extravagant, like really famous playwrights and stuff come in and write amazing screenplays and have all of these guys do all of this. But it was all about magic. It was all about these things, and it captures the mind, it captures the imagination. But then a lot of these people's families are connected with things like Freemasonry, where they speak rituals and they're taking what is like a certain path that's that is obviously has again like esoteric thinking attached to it, and this sort of cult, this feeling of cult is always there. They have to be members of gangs, they have to be members of groups, they have to be organizations, they have to be on the committee of the committees, they have to have the council of foreign relations, they have to have round tables, they have to have all of these different things. They have to have these organizations that are hermetic organizations, and that always ends up then with, okay, it's not related to religion, it's outside religion, let's create our own mysticism. And then these guys then think up the first thing that they think of is going back to the things they were taught when they were young. And most of these rich people were taught about Greek tragedies and all of these other things and lots of Shakespearean stuff and ghosts and this, that, the other. So I think there's an element of that to it. I think the reason why they end up there is because they're more classically trained. I think that was the same maybe for the Nazis, and I mean the original Nazis, not what we have today or what we had in the 80s or any of that. And the original Nazis still exist today, but they're just corporates. They're up there in the offices. That's the real Nazis, the ones who are top business guys. So yeah, I think it's classical education. One of the biggest things is classical education. And I remember when I was about 5 or 6, I was in class 2, Mrs. Moxon, and she said to me, this would have been 1986, and she said to us all that we were no longer going to learn about ancient Britain. We were no longer going to learn about Rome or Greece. That instead we were going to, the curriculum that they were going to be teaching the kids from then on was about Welsh history, which isn't so bad, I suppose. I am Welsh. World War II, which makes sense because everybody knows World War. And I think it was either the English Civil War, but it was like there was a lot of focus on law, basically through history, which isn't so bad either, but ended up with them always talking about witch trials and stuff like that because it's saucy and gets kids interested. But basically what they did is, even when I was young, they were removing it out of the curriculum. They're removing classical education. Now I'm older and I've looked back at the youth programs that these elites were put through. I'm able to see why those youth programs were designed in the way they were. And the same people, Herman Kahn, who I talked about, who wrote the year 2000 and year 200, the next 200 years. At the same time he was writing that, between 1966 and 1968, he was also writing a secret ancillary document for the State Department, which had a section that was about educating leadership group outside society, outside regular society. And then they implemented that. And that's was already, they implemented that. That was already what was happening at Kissinger's International Seminar. And that's the same mentor of Klaus Schwab. At the same time, he was being given to Klaus Schwab as a mentor, was releasing that as a document, and then would go back to with Klaus Schwab and be one of the on the main stage for the first ever World Economic Forum, which was called the European Management Symposium, and would sit up on stage representing those ideas, those exact ideas. You're going to, creating a organization that would eventually train leadership group outside society, just as his document had written and mapped out 4 years before. So it's all, I mean, this is planned, so planned. And it's about separating the leadership group from the rest of us. And so that means they have to predefine, they have to pre-select. So Justin Trudeau gets selected. Why? Hegemony, however you say it. His father was a leader. His father went through that international seminar, Kissinger's International Seminar, the same one Klaus Schwab went through, Pierre Trudeau went through. In actual fact, I think Pierre, I'm going to do more research about this, but I've got so much to do that I didn't get round to this. But Pierre Trudeau's father, I think, is actually related to the man who was really behind Kissinger's International Seminar, a guy called William Yandell Elliott, who was a grandee on a scale I cannot explain, a close advisor to 6 US presidents, and one of the most important people in history, and no one ever knows about him. It's just amazing. Yeah.
So is that, like, I mean, everyone always says that. I read, I forget the author, like Barack Obama was the Manchurian candidate, but you think that I mean, I know that people say, like, just say that all the time, but you think there's some truth then to that kind of statement, that he, as a child, for whatever reason, as a child, whether it's his grandfather's connections, whatever, parents' connections, he's pre-selected out to be pulled out to be educated outside us regular folk.
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, I noticed it before I could define it like that, and I feel, in a sense, is a synchronicity again to me coming across that information and researching Klaus Schwab's rise and Kissinger's entire all of that stuff, because I'd also researched other stuff before that made then a lot more sense. So, for instance, um, Ashdown House School in 1974. There was a guy called Billy Williamson. He was the headmaster of Ashdown House School. It was a private school in Sussex in the UK, and it was an all-boys school. And Billy Williamson had molested boys for years and years and years. These were rich boys as well, like from powerful families, and he was systematically molesting them over and over again. And in 1974, after years and years and years of his reign of terror, um, a guy called Alex, I think his name's Alex Renton, wrote a book about his time, and how he was molested by one of the teachers at this school. So it was more than just the one as well. Billy Williamson was Bear Bottom's banker. He was a friend of Ian Fleming, who wrote James Bond as well. Yeah, shit. These people were really heavily connected. Well, 1974, Boris Johnson's father turns up with Boris Johnson, Joe Johnson, and their daughter, I can never remember her name, Woman Johnson. Female, I think her name's Rebecca or something. And they turn up at the school, and he says to Billy Williamson, this is no longer going to be a boys' school. My daughter's going to come here as well, and you've got to leave. And they don't say why. Dude. And he leaves straight away. Boris Johnson and Joe Johnson go. Of course, Boris Johnson's already pre-select. We know even when he's going through the following years after Ashdown House, he goes to Eton, and then he's like, everybody knows in Eton he's untouchable, and he's going to be a leader one day. He's related to King George III or whatever. They have chosen him. They have selected him. They have made it so that everything that had affected any boy around would not affect him in the same way, that he was complete. And then what did it lead to? Him being basically installed into power. Now they're battling him around like, oh, he's terrible.
Right.
He will come back to power again, just like Trump. It's like a duplicate operation. It's something that you see a lot from America and Britain. Yeah. It's like America running the Trump operation and Britain's running the Boris Johnson operation. Both the let's paint them as far right, even though they're just a little bit right, and extremely dopey, even though they've both been very successful in like most of the things they do. But essentially, yeah, they're selected beforehand. Boris Johnson was selected, and not only was he selected, but a private school had to change completely their ways if they wanted to educate this future leader.
Dude, I think we all suspected that, but that's like just an amazing. Oh, that's amazing, dude. So my last question, I know obviously you follow American politics. What happens in 2024 here? What is are they going to install Trump again to cause utter chaos? Are they going to keep riding with Biden? What's going to happen with our election? Your prediction.
Do you want to hear a really brave prediction? Do you want to hear really brave and dangerous? Do you want?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm excited.
I think that I can't see how Trump could possibly win an election because of the vax stuff. I don't understand. I can't see Biden being on. I can see Kennedy being a very getting lots of momentum and being dead as a doornail at some point. I see history being purposely repeated in a way that is ritualistic, cultish, is everything that the establishment is. So maybe this time, okay, so I don't want to be too narrow. Maybe this time Robert F. Kennedy won't make it to be the person who's the Democratic nomination for president, but the next time he will, if he doesn't this time. If he does this time, he's as dead as a doornail. It's history repeating itself. It's been planned out, mapped out. He'll be lifted to power and he will be shot down in the same way. And it's to remind people who's in charge. It is to remind people who's in charge. Other than that, I mean, if it becomes, I can't see how the Democrats won't end up fixing and rigging the game again. If it's, I'm saying if it's anybody but I think Robert F. Kennedy might get enough momentum to look like he will win the presidency. That could very well happen, but that's only if the Democrats just don't rig the game again, and they always do. So what's really likely to happen? I say all of this buff. What's really likely to happen is that they'll go into counting for who will take over as Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is obviously not going to be able to handle another term. So they'll go in and they'll fix it. We'll all know who it is as soon as it comes up, because it's the one that Bernie Sanders is going to get run over from, or whoever is that supposed left-wing sort of candidate, and it'll be another Obama, Clinton, Biden, push everybody out of the way, or it'll be Kennedy and it'll be tragic. So that's how I feel about it. I just feel that history is it repeats itself, and we always are like, oh my God, it's repeating itself again, and we just got to get over that bit.
No, dude, that's a brave, and you're right. History always rhymes. I mean, I'm sure when after JFK got us no one thought, well, his brother's not going to get his brothers. They can't kill both of them, right? I like that. That's a fun prediction, dude. Well, Johnny, where can people support your work, find you, watch you, support you, all those good things?
Well, I really need people's support right now. So thanks for getting me out. Yeah, I thank everybody. I'm on newspaste.com, Newspaste. And Newspaste is really important to me. I've set it up to be something that I can help get out other people's information, and I can expand it to eventually be something that helps people learn how to research and do other things and gives them tools. There's a new series coming out on there. This already starting out is the Pottinger series. The takedown of Jeffrey Epstein is going to blow people's minds clean off their heads. I support me with how you can, but most of all, just support independent media. Stop paying if you're in Britain, stop paying your TV license and start putting it towards people who are actually doing research and actually doing the job. I got a load of shows, so people can come watch my shows. I got a podcast, Newspace podcast, and please come and talk to me if you want. I'm really interactive.
Awesome, dude. Well, I'm gonna support you right when we end the show here, but I'll put all your links in the show notes. So I really appreciate you doing this late night for you. So Johnny, thanks, man, and thanks for coming on, buddy.
Thanks, Jack. It's been a pleasure, man. Anytime.
All right, everybody, take care. Have a good night, and we'll see you soon. Peace.